Thank you everyone for being here. Thanks Dale and Allison for being here. We'll jump into our conversation in just a moment. Before we do, I kind of just wanted to level set something for this conversation and our panel discussions that follow. Education is a complex topic. I've covered it as a journalist and know that it's really easy to blow through a few hundred words, covering background and explaining an issue before you can get to the latest development on something. So we've got around 25 minutes and then 30 minutes for each of the panels. So like Dan said, we could do a 2-day program. We got less than that. We'll cover a lot of ground, but kind of the questions I've developed are really around kind of bridging that gap between education and business. And so hopefully something we talk about in one of these panels will lead to spark an idea, spark a conversation that carries over to the roundtable discussions that you'll have, that carries over to the networking session, and hopefully everyone can leave with a new connection, a new idea, something to go try, implement in the world, or just have broken down a silo that maybe existed. So that's the goal. We'll see if we can accomplish it. Let's start with learning a little bit more about each of you. Dale, we kind of, many folks probably know you, but could you just touch on a little bit of your background and MMAC and MMAC's interest in the education topic? Why is this an issue that MMAC focuses on?
Yeah, for many different levels, I'm very focused on education because I could go to just different parts of my life. Most importantly, as a father of 4 kids, education is something we talk about on a daily basis. And especially in a house of ours, I appreciate the pastor's words, the father's words about the importance of intellect and character, and I try to embody that in the Kooyenga household. From a national security perspective, you heard that I'm a Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army. I mean, we're not the largest nation, we're not the nation with the greatest resources, but we are the nation that has the highest level of education, and that gives us the best and brightest. And the best and brightest is what keeps not only us safe, but keeps the world safe. Economically, it's an intangible economy, and it's ideas and productivity and creativity that keep us a leader, and that comes through education. So I could go down the list as far as my involvement in education, from public policy when I was in politics. But from a Metropolitan Milwaukee Association of Commerce, I just want to give a shout out to my predecessor, Tim Sheehy, and the landscape that MMAC has made under his leadership in education. And that was back in the late 80s. The concept of school choice was nothing more than a chapter in a book by Milton Friedman called Free to Choose. And the concept was school choice, and no one was doing it. And what it took a frustrated former superintendent of Milwaukee Public Schools, Howard Fuller, and then it took a business community who said, we want to try something radically different. And probably because Tim was too young to know what the risk he was taking, because I've talked to other chamber presidents about getting involved in education, and it's amazing throughout the country, a lot of them say, oh, that's way too controversial, I don't know, I don't want to go there. But they did, and they also had courageous legislators and a governor that said, let's try something radically different. And so that's where school choice came from, and then expand to Racine, expand throughout Wisconsin, and now nationally, you have parents that are able to send their students, their kids, to schools that do 2 things. Schools that match their academic excellence standards and their principles, whether it be faith-based or character or whatever it is. And so that's what MMAC has been doing on education. That's my background. I think Tim Sheehy's legacy will really be his fingerprint of bringing the business community, connecting it with education, which I really appreciate what you guys are doing here on that front. And I can assure you that legacy is going to continue, not only because it's important to me, but it's very important to our 85-member board. So we'll keep on this topic as well.
Allison, similar question to you. Just a little bit about your background and a little bit about All in Milwaukee and the work you guys do in the education space.
Yes, thank you. My name is Allison Wagner. I'm the founding executive director of All in Milwaukee. As you heard in my bio, my entire career was actually in the K-12 space. And what I found was there were a lot of amazing schools. There are high quality schools across all 3 sectors, charter, choice district, that were getting students through, but there was a leaky pipeline when it came to diverse low-income students getting through college. And it really was when I was doing consulting work and I was helping organizations like the Milwaukee Academy of Science find Anthony McHenry, or helping Aug Prep build their leadership team. And all of these different boards and organizations were looking for diverse talent and diverse candidates, but no one in our community was building that diverse pipeline. And we started to really look into the data and see the horrific amounts of scholars who are graduating high school from quality high schools, again, across all three sectors, but were not persisting through college. And that's unfortunately the reality here in Milwaukee that we're trying to serve. We have the largest racial achievement gap in the country, and that continues in terms of college persistence and graduation and career placement. And that's really where we've been able to join forces with organizations like the MMAC, many of its corporate members. I'm really grateful for the BizTimes investment and, understanding of this importance, because many of us in this room want to see diverse candidates in our organizations, but unless we are providing the same robust support through college and in career development and placement, we are not going to see that pipeline, and we're not going to see that diverse workforce. And so that's what All in Milwaukee has been getting to work on. We were very fortunate to bring a proven model from Minneapolis here 6 years ago. My founder, Darren Jackson, who was part of bringing the program here, is here today. And really, we've been very blessed that so many partners have believed in us, from the high school space to nominate students and to get them ready for college. We have 8 amazing university partners who we work in collaboration with to make sure our students have more aid and more support. And we have more than 55 corporate partners who are working with us to develop our students, to hire them for internships, and then to hire them for full-time jobs. And later, you're going to hear from Angie Sandoval, one of our graduates who's got a full-time job at Johnson Controls. She was an amazing student who came from Cristo Rey, one of our high school partners. She went to UW-Madison, graduated debt-free in 4 years, and now has a job at Johnson Controls. And that's exactly, to Ray's point, who's on my board of directors. I'm very fortunate to learn from Ray. That's exactly how the partnerships work. We've got to have a trajectory of the right high schools and community-based organizations getting students to college. We have to have the right partnership with the universities and the support organizations to get through students through college, and we've got to have the right career partners, whether you want to be a teacher, a nurse, or an engineer that is doing career development and placement, because the reality is we don't have that ecosystem and all of those partners figured out yet in this community, and until we do, we'll continue to have a leaky pipeline and the large racial achievement gap that exists today.
Maybe just we kind of set this panel up as an overview. So from both your perspectives, what are maybe some of the bright spots in Milwaukee education and in the landscape? I mean, Allison, your organization serves hundreds of students, has had to turn away, have a wait list, and has plans to scale up. So there are bright spots, there are strong schools, there are students that graduate with great potential. What are some of the bright spots in your view?
Yes, thank you for asking. We just had our deadline for the class of 2024 on February 14th. We received 503 high-quality applications from low-income but high-performing students. So we have both a merit and a need-based component to our program. Now, we were thrilled. We fundraised $3 million for 150 scholar spots for the next 4 years, but we'll have less than a 30% acceptance rate, again, of high need, high potential, high performing Milwaukee students who, when we peel back the data, come from 49 different high schools, whose average family taxable income is $39,000. They're 88% first generation students. They're 99% students of color, and they want to be part of our program. So the good news is there's plenty of talent out there. There's amazing scholars coming from those 49 different community-based organizations, and I have to shout out my friend Andre Douglas, who's here, and coming from organizations like Graduation Plus, 35% of the students in our program come from the Boys and Girls Club, and no one's doing college access better than Andre Douglas and the Boys and Girls Club. So we're seeing amazing scholars. But then what we know is we're going to take 150 of them into our program, where we have an 87% persistence to graduation rate, yet the reality in Milwaukee is 16% of high school graduates will earn a 2 or 4 year degree. Again, 16% of high school graduates will earn a 2 or 4 year degree. That's DPI data. So we've got to do more to wrap around and get behind these students and make sure that we're providing the same robust support through college and into careers that they're receiving at the 49 different high schools. You know, our largest feeders are Reagan, an MPS school, Aug Prep, a choice school, Carmen, a charter school. I mean, we have amazing schools that we need to grow, the high-performing schools, and make sure we have more students who have opportunities like the All in Milwaukee program to get through college and get to the workforce. Again, just to give a few stats in terms of the good news, what we have found after launching in just 5 years in a new market in a pandemic, we have an 87% persistence to graduation rate. 90% of the students in our program have no student debt, and that's thanks to the scholarship we provide, but most importantly, that's thanks to the 8 amazing university partners who provide our students more aid, sort of like you'd see a student athlete receive. Our scholars get additional aid and additional support, and so I have to give, you know, shout outs to Alverno, Carroll, Marquette, MSOE, UW-Madison, UW-Milwaukee, UW-Whitewater, and Wisconsin Lutheran College, because 5 years ago they got behind us as a concept and bought into our proven model for Minneapolis, and they've allowed us to get these amazing results here. And as we start to look at our graduates, 97% of the students in our first class did stay in the state of Wisconsin to start their careers or to go to graduate school. And so we truly believe we are developing that critical pipeline of diverse talent, but we've got to do more, and we've got to do it collectively, because the data tells us only 16% will graduate college or earn a 2 or 4 year degree without our support. The other piece I'd like to just say, and you know, coming out of the pandemic, we're still all recovering from the virtual learning and from the lack of school. I mean, we see the NAEP data, and we see it as students struggle with the transition to college. We have about 15% of students in this city who are reading on grade level, and about 10% who are at grade level for math. And so we also, you know, I see so many of the amazing school leaders in this room in the K-12 space who are working so hard to make sure students are getting caught up. But we also in some ways need to reimagine what it looks like for certain students who aren't coming to the universities academically nourished. And it's not that they can't get there, but they may need a 5-year plan for engineering or a 5-year plan for nursing. They may need additional remedial courses or summer bridge programs or required tutoring or lower caseloads of credits. And we really need to work and customize and meet students where they are, especially coming out of the pandemic. We're still seeing so many of our students recovering and trying to stay on track to earn their degrees, but we know how hard that's been with all of the lack of learning that occurred in those couple years.
Dale, Allison touched on some of the bright spots and some of the challenges. What do you see, I guess, on both those fronts? What do you see as bright spots in education? What do you see as challenges?
Well, first of all, I think it's incumbent on all of us to always focus on the bright spots and always be optimistic, because that's what our community deserves, and that's what we need to portray in the classroom at the upper levels. Like, there's a lot to celebrate, so I know there's a lot of challenges out there, but be optimistic. There's a lot of goodness going on in our city. I think a lot of what I'm really excited about was MMAC's top priority last year during the budget was to close the funding gap between traditional public school students and charter students and voucher students. And we didn't close it all the way, and it's a moving target, but we substantially closed that gap with the largest increase in voucher and charter per student funding in Wisconsin history. And so, thank you. So you know what that means. So that means that you were, when I say you, I'm talking to the educators, institutions in the room, is you had to fundraise, and you are fundraising to fund that gap between the state amount and what it actually costs to educate a kid. There's still a gap there that you need to fundraise, and from what I'm hearing, and that's great news, is that you're still putting the pedal to the metal on fundraising, but your fundraising now doesn't necessarily have to go to that operating cost gap, is that could go to capacity building. And we're seeing capacity building. We're seeing capacity building with Aug Prep. I mean, $100 million at the old Cardinal Stritch campus. Hope Christian Schools just announced some new things that they were doing. You have St. Marcus that's doing more. I mean, so what we need to do is, the problem is we have failing schools in our public school system, our choice school system, and in our charter school system. we need to have some consolidations. We need to have some expansions of schools that do work. And just like we do in the business world, if you have a line that's not working, like, you got to shut that down. You got to go in a different direction. So I'm hoping that these institutions that have proven models that are succeeding, they increase capacity because of this new funding, and other places don't. To go to the places where there's capacity. And there's a lot of capacity out there for, we need a lot of capacity out there.
We talked, kind of about the goal here is making that bridge between business and education, but there is an MPS referendum on the ballot in April. Kind of seems silly to kind of just ignore that completely. So this is a referendum that would allow MPS to exceed its revenue limits by $252 million on a recurring basis, kind of phased in over 4 years. Initially $2.16 per $1,000 equalized value increase to the mill rate. So I know when that first one on the ballot, Dale, you had a president's message out that kind of raised some concerns with it, said, well, okay, where's this money going to go? How exactly is it going to translate to the classroom? What's this going to mean for property taxes? As you've kind of maybe talked to folks in the community over the last month since it was approved for the ballot, what have you learned? Has your position evolved? Where are you at on that right now?
Well, everything we've learned raised our sense of concern 100-fold since we put that out. The $250 million in increase in property taxes will put Milwaukee among the highest property tax cities in the Midwest. Google how much the average American has in savings. It's $400. For the median family home in Milwaukee, this will be a $440 increase in their property taxes. And the question is what are we going to get for this $250 million? $250 million. The Milwaukee Public School System got $800 million in federal money, and there was no increase in the test scores. We are a partner with Milwaukee Public Schools. We want to see Milwaukee Public Schools succeed. And what that looks like is we have all sorts of programming we do with them at MMAC, be the Spark program. We're doing a large grant that is from the Bucyrus Foundation originally that will put automation into high schools. We're doing that at Barack Obama High School. We're doing that at Bradley Tech. But the fact is that Milwaukee needs a middle class. We need a middle class. And our middle class cannot afford those types of property tax increases. It also doesn't welcome businesses. And by the way, I know some folks just assume this, but other folks can't put it together, is just because you don't write a property tax bill and you're a renter, that will get passed on to you. We're doing a survey right now of landlords in Milwaukee, and we're asking that question. Will you be passing on this property tax increase to your renters? And the answer is yes. And so we'll be putting news out on that. But once again, we want to support Milwaukee Public Schools, but we also want to support Milwaukee's middle class. And we think that the referendum is way too much. There's not a plan, and some bigger structural different changes need to happen before the voters approve that.
So this isn't just a Milwaukee thing in terms of the districts going with referendums. When the district put this on the ballot, they pointed to, okay, so inflation adjustments were phased out, nothing in the late aughts. And they said it's like $200 million that if the state aid kept pace with inflation, that they'd be getting. They also pointed to, look, there's lots of other districts that are doing these recurring referendums, not the kind that do new schools or new gymnasiums or things like that, but ones related to the operating budget. There's been like 89 of them over the last 5 years, and every even year there's like 20 on the ballot. There's 20 on the ballot this spring. So is this something that, yes, Milwaukee's asking for a lot of money, but is this something that is a good thing that they're coming to the voters, or does state lawmakers need to make some kind of change to kind of address some of the underlying issues that they're seeking to kind of cover or deal with this referendum?
Well, state lawmakers definitely need to make a change. There's problems all sorts of places in education funding, and there deserves to be more education funding across the spectrum. But the public school portion of it is a local decision, and that's part of the operating process. And if you look at the local decision here, that's what we were weighing in on and looking at. But if you look at the amount that it's for and why it's for, that's what raises our concern. And so a lot of these do pass through the state because I think the state needs to reinvest in education across all sectors there. But on this particular one, we really can't understand why it's over $250 million. And then also, if you look at some structural questions for Milwaukee Public Schools, you could look in the financial statements and it shows the number of students, the number of buildings. And if you divide out the number of students by the number of buildings, there's a 26% less students per building, which simply tells you is that there's opportunities there to save money. And that money is money that could go directly into the classroom. If you take the total amount of revenue right now that Milwaukee Public Schools has and you divide it out by the number of students they have, it comes over to over $21,000 per student. Now, let's say the average class is 20 students. $21,000 times 20 is over $440,000. The average teacher, you do the same math, the average teacher, all benefits in, is about $120,000. So we just have a lot of questions, is between that $440,000 per classroom and that $120,000 per teacher. Yes, there's transportation, yes, there's special needs. By the way, that's something the state needs to fix, is the special needs funding has to drastically increase. That's a huge problem. But when you look at that gap in there, is where is that gap, where is that money going? Where is it going? And we think that there has to be a much, much deeper dive and some very reform-minded decisions made in that system before our middle class, working class in Milwaukee is among the highest taxed people in the Midwest. That is not conducive to the mayor's goal that we 100% support, and that is to make this a 1 million person city. You cannot have those type of property taxes and have a 1 million person city.
So there's, as we said, there's plenty of, you could go down the politics part of education, that could be the 2-day program on its own. Education can be a politically fraught space. People have different opinions, people have strong opinions. What advice especially for the business folks in the room who maybe aren't super involved in education, how should they think about, how do I get involved with, I don't want to touch the politics part of this, I just want to help in some way. What's your advice for them in terms of getting involved without getting too involved, I guess? For both of you.
And there's many different things you do. First of all, you have time and money. I'll start with that. Is with your time, you should just take some time and go read with kids in the class. I think nearly every school, if you contact them and say, I would like to spend some of my time and read with kids in your school, I think nearly every school will say yes. So that's one thing to do, is give your time, volunteer. And we call this the military force multiplier. If you do that, bring a friend, put it in your company, hey, I'm doing this. So your time. 2 is write a check. Find your favorite school, find out what they're doing, make sure there's accountability, because I just talked about accountability, make sure there's accountability, and take your check out and write a check. So those are 2 ways to do it, and I think just telling the story of what's right, what's wrong. I mean, not all schools are created equal. There's schools out there across all systems that are absolutely failing our kids. Absolutely failing our kids. And by the way, there's families failing their own kids as well, and that has to be addressed in this as well. But they're absolutely failing. And there's other school systems that are not only fixing the kids and teaching them, but they're also fixing families in that process. And that, by the way, is one of the secret sauces to success. So be a good investor and know what you're investing in and get involved with your time and money.
Allison?
Yeah, from my perspective, there are so many amazing students to get behind and to make sure that you're helping to open doors for them so that they can walk through them. And so I look at my friends here at Northwestern Mutual. They had 18 all in Milwaukee interns last summer out of about 150 interns in their organization. They truly walk the talk. And not only did they hire our students for internships, but they provided mentors for them so that they had either a young professional or a professional of color helping them with the transition and supporting them into their role. They also did institutes for all in Milwaukee, where we had all 415 of our college students on campus learning in a professional environment, networking, building skills, and they invested in all of them by opening their doors and that in-kind donation. And they've also done things like talent sessions where we have actually gotten dozens of Northwestern Mutual volunteers who have done one-on-one sessions to provide resume feedback, networking skills, do mock interviews. So I mean, back to the time and the treasure, figure out within your organization where you can lend a hand and which organizations you can invest in. But from my seat as a nonprofit leader, don't try and drive your agenda. Truly, if you find a winning community-based organization or school, sit with that leader, truly understand what they need and how you can help. Because what we don't need is the Christmas tree effect where we're just throwing a bunch of things on. What we need, back to the point from earlier, are strategic partnerships where we can together, from schools to universities to employers, work together to make sure we don't have that leaky pipeline and we can get the high potential, high need students all the way through our systems by working together in a coordinated and collaborative way.
Well, our upcoming panels will help us dive into some of those strategic partnerships that are already ongoing and maybe learn some best practices. So we'll leave it there for our education overview. Dale and Allison, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.